Hey, everybody, this is Andy.
And Pete.
We're here. Just a quick message, because what you're about to listen to is not a regular episode for the public. It's actually one of our member bonus episodes that we release to members.
Yeah, that's what we do.
That's right.
We sure do, Andy.
This is our May member bonus episode. We ask our members, what series should we dip back into? And they voted on Great Car Chases. And then of the movies we provided, they voted on the Blues Brothers. So we're going to be doing an episode on the Blues Brothers. And, this is the sort of thing that you get if you become a member. Pete, how can people find out about membership?
If you head over to just thenextreel.com, it'll take you to our landing page over at truestory.fm, and you can just click the button that says, I want to be a member. And there are a couple of options for you. And once you sign up, once you can start contributing to the show, you get access to all kinds of great, all of our member-only channels in our Discord server. You get your own access to the member feed so that you get shows like this and the special versions of each episode that we do that include a lot of other BS at the beginning and the end.
It's kind of a little more unedited opens.
A little bit unedited opens, and but we leave all that stuff where we're talking to you and at you, special member, and that's what you're going to get with the member feed. And we love doing it, and we hope you want to join up.
That's right, because we have Discord channels where the members can listen in on our live stream and can, send us notes through Discord, and so we will, call them out at times too. So, all of that. Plus, we do a flick chart re-ranking every month. We do the retake episodes at the end of each series. So all sorts of stuff that members get. And sometimes even stickers in the mail show up. So
they do. We could say with enthusiasm that sometimes they get stickers. I would also like to call out special members. Nick would like to see if Blues Brothers 2000 will get a mention. Check. And Ray likes pineapple on pizza, just like me. So there's two call outs.
There it is. So so consider becoming a member. We'd appreciate it. And we think that there's a lot of great content for you. And you get all the back member content, too. There's so much stuff that is out there. I think this past year we released nearly as many member bonus episodes as we did regular episodes. So there's a lot of content to dig into.
Good Lord, what are we doing with our lives?
All right, well, let's kick this episode off. And but anyway, consider becoming a member. We'd appreciate it. And with that, here's the episode.
I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Blues Brothers is over. I hate Illinois Nazis.
You'd better get bright, pal. We got a show to do. Then we got to figure out some way to collect that gate money. Get it to the Cook County Assessor's office as soon as they open in the morning.
Joliet, Jake, and Elwood Blues. Two men with a mission, and only 11 days.
And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
Our Lady of Blessed Acceleration, don't fail me now.
Well, me and the Lord, we got an understanding. We're on a mission from God.
Yeah, how do you pick a single line from the Blues Brothers, Andy?
That's one of the biggest challenges with this movie. It is a movie of just so many quotable lines. I find myself probably more often than makes sense given the context of conversations, but saying orange whip, three orange whips.
Orange whip, three orange whips. Yep. Delightful candy line. This is the bigger problem, that sometimes I'm quoting lines from the movie that I have forgotten were in this movie. Do you do that? Like, I just have been quoting them so long they start to feel like me. Like, for example, yeah, a lot of space in this mall.
Yes, you forget. It just becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
And then you don't even realize it until you watch it again. You're like, oh, this is why I say that so often.
This is it. Danny, this was it. So my first child was a girl child, my daughter. And every time I had this thing. Every time my wife and I, we would hand off the child, right? She would be like holding the child, and then she'd hand it to me, and I would say, "How much for the little girl?" And I like only realized, oh, that was planted in my psyche by the Blues Brothers. So, yeah. That's great.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into this conversation. Oh, we should say this is a member bonus episode. This is an addition to our Great Car Chases series. It very easily could also fall into the Couples on the Run series.
Couples on the Run, yeah.
Although we've done that more recently. So Great Car Chases, we haven't. And the members voted on the Blues Brothers. So here we are talking about Joliet Jake and Elwood Blues in this movie. When this movie was released, it was rated R, mostly for the 9 F-bombs said throughout the film. It's a comedy. Most of the stuff's not too bad, even the sexual jokes and stuff. It's pretty much just a profanity rating.
Now, I know I did not finish. You recommended to me that I listen to these episodes of this podcast, and I didn't listen to all of them because it just felt like a lot of work, because I know you already did. So I feel like you need to do the setup of Landis.
Are you saying you kind of collapsed on?
Yeah.
There were 2 episodes. There's a podcast called Behind the Bastards, where they look at bastards throughout history and kind of talk about different elements of them. And they did a 2-part episode on John Landis, specifically talking about the making of the Twilight Zone movie, or I should say the Twilight Zone, the movie, and the horrible disaster that happened on the set of that, largely because of John Landis on his part of the film. It's a tragedy, and there's a book. I'm trying to remember what the book is called that kind of details it. I don't remember. There was a book that somebody released that is talking about the kind of walking through that entire incident and everything that happened there. And I think that you really get a sense of just how disrespectful John Landis was of the cast and crew, all for the sake of getting the big shot. I mean, his story is the one about the Vietnam, or the guy who's just a terrible racist. And, he's brought back through moments in history where he's, having to live as one of the people who is persecuted. And one of the scenes is, he's goes back to Vietnam and has to save 2 Vietnamese children from the attacking American helicopter. And, Landis had these explosions going off next to the helicopter late at night. He had children working on set illegally that, had no paperwork or anything to actually be there. And one of these explosions that he had go off next to the helicopter went a little too close and damaged the rotors, I guess, and the helicopter crashed, killed both children, killed Vic Morrow, the actor in the scene, injured everybody on the helicopter, Landis was able to kind of continue his career. I mean, sure, he had to go through some legal proceedings and everything, but it didn't end up really turning into much. So, you look at kind of the continuation of his career, and it becomes pretty tragic that I think nowadays, like ever since Me Too and stuff, I think that there would have been a lot more discussion about this and prosecution and everything that likely would have ended his career rather than him being in a place where he was able to continue it. And I think that's something that's shifted with society, is that, these are the sorts of things that directors could get away with back then that unfortunately still ended up with 3 people's deaths, and he was able to continue his career. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, it happens after the Blues Brothers, but, we've done a few John Landis films, Coming to America, The Three Amigos, both of which happened afterward. And I feel like we never really talked about it. So I feel like, we should actually mention that there is some horrific stuff to think about and discuss when it comes to John Landis and him as a filmmaker.
Yeah. Has that ever changed your take on, hanging with Landis's films? Obviously not, as we're talking about the Blues Brothers.
Well, I think the thing that happens in these things is, I think this is true of so many artists throughout history. It's like, can you separate the art from the artist? And Roman Polanski certainly is a name that's brought up a lot in these conversations. Woody Allen nowadays, I feel like it just keeps coming, Kevin Spacey and Mel Gibson and Bill Cosby and James Franco. And it's like, it becomes difficult to really start defining that line and creating that delineation. But I think you look through history and you're going to find the same with musicians and painters. And I think there are bad people doing all sorts of bad things all through any sort of career. And, certainly in the arts. And it's just one of those things where, I think that I find a way to kind of separate the art from the artist, appreciate the project for what it is. And I think there's a big difference, though, with something like Twilight Zone, the movie, where you're actively watching something where the director was irresponsible and actually led to 3 deaths.
Yeah, that's
during the actual production of the film, as opposed to watching American Beauty, for example, and
knowing decades later that this guy ended up being
right.
Kind of a
horror. It was probably happening around that time.
Yeah,
but it wasn't part of the integral nature of the film, and so that's
interesting.
Yeah, so there's that line, and so does it make it harder for me to want to go back and watch Twilight Zone the movie again? At least his part. I mean, I love Joe Dante's, I love George Miller's. Those are, I think, the 2 best parts of that particular film. But it's one of those things. And then also it's like, well, do I also, just as a side note, there are things about John Landis that I also just don't like him as a person. The Phoenix Film Festival, he came out. I think that he had done a documentary, and I can't remember what the documentary was called, but he was on tour doing, thing for his documentary. And I was working the festival, and I knew the girl, or the woman, I should say, who was assigned to be kind of his handler and kind of get him from place to place. And talking to her after the fact, she talked about how he was a very gropey guy and his hands were always on her, and she was incredibly uncomfortable and didn't want to say anything because she didn't want to. It was that situation. It's like they put you into this situation where you don't want to say anything and cause a scene because this is this person, and that's how they continue getting away with it. And it just kind of made me really disgusted about him as a person in general. Yeah. And so I try to think about him as little as possible. Does it mean I'm not going to enjoy the Blues Brothers? No, I love this movie. Same with a number of his films. And so it puts you into that mental space, though.
Yeah, it does. The fact that, we've covered as many films as we have without having more of that conversation is a sign of how, easily history does its thing. And but I don't think we're in a hurry to talk about the Twilight Zone. So that's fine.
Or really any other. I mean, if you look at his list, and maybe it's just this is hitting because we're like, oh, we haven't really, we've kind of run the gamut of the films of his we want to talk about.
We haven't done Animal House. If there was any interest in having a conversation about Animal House, that's the only other one that has a bit of has enough sort of cultural weight to it that might be worth having a conversation about. It's been a lot of years since I've seen it, and I remember some funny bits.
I've never really liked it, so I don't know if I would have too much inclination to discuss it. Into the Night is an interesting film. Spies Like Us, yeah, that's a funny film.
Yep.
Everything that he's done. I mean, I feel like if there was something we were going to do, it would be if we jump back into the Beverly Hills Cop series and ended up kind of just finishing all those films and end up covering Beverly Hills Cop 3.
But that would be accidental.
Yeah.
he would be.
We wouldn't be doing it because
secondary. Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Enough about that.
Yes, we're here to talk about the Blues Brothers. Where did you first, like in the late 70s, 1978, this is when we had Saturday Night Live and we had John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd create these characters, Jake and Elwood Blues, as a sketch on Saturday Night Live. Was Saturday Night Live a thing for you at this point in time? Was the film first for you? Did you ever look at the sketches? How did you come to this?
Well, I am definitely an SNL fan, but you got to remember in the late 70s, like we were very young. And so what I have to thank for my introduction to the Blues Brothers, I thought they were a band first for a lot of years because my mother had Briefcase Full of Blues, and that was in the rotation with like Canned Heat and Sam and Dave. Like this was just part of the soundtrack of my early youth. Was listening to this stuff, and so I think it was when 1980, my mom got the Made in America album. And I had that. I carried that with me as long as I had a record player. I had stolen that from her. And so they were musicians first. It was when I started watching SNL and finally was able to go back and look at some of the early clips to see King Bee and, the original Bees sketch that started it all, that I realized, oh my God, these guys, like, I had no idea. I had no idea. I don't think I even knew that the Blues Brothers were Belushi and Aykroyd for a lot of years, right? Like, not at all. What about you?
I mean, largely the same. And just to clarify, over in our member chat, our live chat, Ray pointed out they weren't created for a sketch. They were billed as the legitimate musical act on the show. That is true and not true. It was a musical. It was a musical sketch, is the way that they actually bill it. So it was a sketch with these two guys but actually as the musical guest. So, I mean, it was a whole kind of thing where they were these two regulars on SNL created these characters to do this musical thing. So it's actually pretty interesting, kind of the creation of them.
Well, and because the bee outfit had already been used for other sketches, and that was the gag, right? That they were coming out and that somehow these characters also were musicians. That was my kind of memory of it. Like, that was the funny bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Killer Bee sketch was a non-musical sketch.
Yeah.
Originally, right? This was the funny bit from Lauren Michaels, who says, the only note we got from the network on our very first show was cut the bees. And so I made sure to put them in on the next show. So the Killer Bees were actually the first recurring characters on SNL. Yeah, so they made it into the show. And that's what I think makes the musical transition so good. It's just funny. It's absurdist.
Yeah. So for me, I was not tuned into SNL until much later in life. Like high school probably is when I first kind of found it and connected with it. And so I completely missed it. I had a buddy, though, who was very into this movie, and I remember him like always wanting to put it on. And so I saw bits and pieces of it over the years because of him. And it probably also wasn't until high school that I ended up finally watching it. And because, you're hanging out with theater kids and you're watching stuff like this all the time and it just really kind of clicking with the characters. And I loved the music and the kind of the comedy of it and just the over the top nonsense that we have throughout, especially as the car chases just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And so it's just a fun movie. And so it's kind of been in my life off and on through my youth, but really since high school. And so I never really I never had the Blues Brothers albums, I think they've now released 5 live albums plus a couple studio albums, things like that. And other than the soundtrack to this, I've never listened to their stuff, but I mean, they legit would actually do some great stuff. And I think what makes this work, and this is what I think is interesting when it comes to SNL sketches that survive outside of Saturday Night Live, is that you really get a sense that Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi had an incredible fondness and connection and desire to kind of dig deep into all of this fantastic blues music and the history of it. And you just get a sense, especially watching this film, how how much they really pay homage to all of these people who are part of that history. And that's what I think is exciting about what they do here.
These two guys could have, with just a slight breeze from the east, could very easily have ended up starting as a band and never been on Saturday Night Live, right? I mean, I get the sense that they love the music so much that it while it ended up as an avocation, it could very much have been their vocation. They're good at it. They're entertaining. The music is great. They clearly have, they built a band with legit skill. Right. The band is full of exceptional musicians. And so I think, the fact that is central to the movie is what makes the movie different from other SNL adapted, sketch adapted films, right? It has at its core more substance to it than some of these other films that have taken off and I think that's what makes the Blues Brothers more of a lasting title in the canon. It's the one that I think about that has the most, obviously, to me, staying power.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick quiz for you right now. You ready?
Oh God, no. What are you going to do?
SNL sketches that turned into films. First of all, how many do you think there are?
Oh, I think there are probably a lot.
Well,
I don't know. Are there more than 10?
There are.
12. 50.
No, it's actually
72?
11.
It's
72.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
Okay.
Tell me.
This is the first one. Okay. So name as many as you can. So you got the Blues Brothers.
Okay. All right. So it does it count if I give you characters if I can't think of
Sure. I'll help you out.
Because I know Stuart Smalley, Al Franken got a movie, right?
Stuart Saves His Family, correct.
Harold Ramis did that one, and I think we talked a little bit about it. Okay. So Stuart, what'd you say?
Stuart Saves His Family.
Has a family. Stuart Saves His Family. All right.
Yes. Sequels are on this list too.
Okay. Did Aykroyd get any other?
Yes.
He did.
Yes.
Well, let's see. So Ghostbusters was not an SNL thing.
No.
Oh, dear. So Aykroyd got one, but what was the character?
Jane Curtin was also in the movie.
Oh, Coneheads.
Coneheads, yes.
Coneheads, okay. Well, I know, so Wayne's World obviously was one, right? That was
right.
a sketch. And so that would be 2.
Yeah, Wayne's World 2, and I'll also give you Blues Brothers 2000. You haven't said it, but I'll give it to you.
All right. So I'm Blues Brothers, Wayne's World, Coneheads, Stuart Saves His Family.
So you're at 6. So you got 5 more.
Plus
yes.
6. Okay. Oh, MacGruber,
yes.
That's it. But see, I feel like I missed a bunch.
Well, you did. And MacGruber is the most recent one. That was 2010. So it has been 12 years since we've had one.
Okay. Do you feel like at this point I could get a hint? Can I phone a friend? And is that friend you?
Yes. There's one involving 2 guys dancing.
Oh, was that a Will Ferrell?
Will Ferrell?
With their heads?
Yes. Chris Kattan.
Night at the Roxbury.
Night at the Roxbury. There you go.
Okay.
Armpits?
Oh, Mary Catherine Gallagher, Molly Shannon's character. What was that?
What does she say?
She's so funny. She gets down on her knee and she says, "Oh my God, what is her line?" Oh my God!
Begins with an
superstars.
A superstar. Yes. Dare to dream. That is right. We've got Tim Meadows.
I didn't see this one. This was his ladies' man character, right?
Yes, that's what it's called, the ladies' man.
Oh. Okay. Outstanding. All right. So where are we now?
The only one that you're missing is the biggest flop of all of the SNL films that had come out.
Okay.
It involves a character.
I would have said that was Ladies' Man already. So just know that right. I now have no idea where the bar is.
Oh, no. The Ladies' Man was definitely not at the bottom. So this is a very androgynous character.
Oh, God. This was Julia Sweeney's thing, right? It's Pat. It's Pat.
It's Pat, exactly.
Oh, God, that was not good. It was just not a good or kind idea.
It's a weird character, just a weird character, yeah. So there are 11 films. I said It's Pat was the lowest grossing of the bunch. It cost $8 million to make, only made not even $61,000.
Wow.
Complete failure. Which one would you say is the highest grossing? And this is not adjusted for inflation, by the way.
Well, I would have said Wayne's World.
And you'd be right. That one did the best. The second film did the best. The first film was second to the Blues Brothers. Both of those crossed the 100 million mark worldwide. None of the other films have. In fact, the highest after that was Wayne's World 2, just over 48 million. So it's interesting that they haven't found anything since the first two films of 11 that have actually been able to kind of connect with people as much as the Blues Brothers and Wayne and Garth.
Are you watching any SNL now?
I'm not. I haven't watched it for a while.
I feel like when was the mid 90s SNL had the same sort of intention at SNL, they would have made Stefan a movie. Do you know Stefan, the hater character?
Yes.
Which is fantastic on Weekend Update. But I feel like there are people who were at SNL in the 90s who would have advocated for making Stefan a film. And I'm so relieved they didn't, because that's a rough sailing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other SNL gags right now that would make a transition to a film. I can't think
it's a trick. I mean, and that's the challenge. And I think, it's hard enough to come up with characters that can really stand the test of time just on the show, but then to make a character who can not only stand the test of time as a recurring character on the show, but can also step out of that to become a character that can sustain an entire film and really kind of carry it to, one or maybe even two films. And so I think that with the Blues Brothers, I think absolutely, if it hadn't been for Belushi's death just a couple years after the release of this, I think it likely would have had a sequel much earlier than Blues Brothers 2000 that would have allowed for them to kind of continue, because it was such a big success at the time.
MacGruber is another one of those interesting ones to me, though. Like, it did not do well, but it's got a show right now. Like, it's a film that, or a property that seems to have longer legs than I would have expected.
That speaks a lot to just kind of the Will Forte, kind of that goofiness of the character. Because I think there's something that, I don't know, I guess there is something about that just seems like it has some potential. And so, I mean, MacGruber didn't make a ton of money at the box office, but if any of them feel like there's a little bit more of kind of a cult following, it does seem like that one may have something,
Yeah, right. So. Okay. All right. Well, that was an interesting quiz. I have to tell you, I feel like I did better than I would have expected.
Well, one day when we decide to do the SNL series and we cover all the rest of these films, can't wait for that It's Pat conversation. Yeah. Oh, my. Oh. Okay. Anyway, so Blues Brothers, back to the movie, back to this film. So, this was a film that they wanted to get made pretty quickly because it was so successful. But I guess it was one of those things where Belushi was this big star because of Animal House, and there was a bidding war to actually make this movie. And Universal and Paramount both were bidding on it. Universal ends up winning the bid, and they want to make the movie for $12 million. John Landis was on board, and because he had worked with Belushi in Animal House as the director there, he wanted $20 million to make it. The script, though, was a little bit of an issue. Dan Aykroyd was tasked to write the script. He had never written a screenplay before, and he talks about this on the making of. And so he hadn't even looked at a script. And so he decided he was going to just write the script, and it just becomes this huge thing. It goes into the backstories of the characters, how they got the band initially, all this sort of stuff. It was a 324-page script that he put together, 3 times the length that the script should have been. It wasn't even in in proper script format, it was just very loose. And actually, as part of the joke of turning a script in that was so big, he actually put the yellow pages, the binding, the cover of it on it when he turned his script in, just to kind of make fun of it. And so that was a big thing. They ended up having John Landis tasked to actually take what Aykroyd had done, condense it into something that was workable. And so hence you got the credit of both of those two at the top of the film for writing this. They didn't write it together, but that was kind of the process. But I don't know. I always find that Dan Aykroyd seems like, I guess I think of him as the person who really has that connection to kind of the R&B background with the film and these characters and everything. And so I can't help but feel like he was really the one pushing to have James Brown and Cab Calloway and Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and all these people pop up in the film because of his passion for it. And I don't know how much of that was actually in the script or if that's something that he and Landis really kind of talked about. But like bringing those people on to play little bit parts throughout the film, I think gives it so much interesting vibe. I mean, what do you think of having all these musical stars popping up in such kind of small parts?
Well, I'm curious, how many of them did you like? Do you have a memory of how many of them you could pick out?
Well, it was one of those things that obviously changed with time. Like initially when I saw this, I don't know how many people I was recognizing. And so as I grew up and kind of more familiar with this stuff, you start getting a sense. And I mean, I may not have right away known who Cab Calloway was, but once that curtain opens late in the film and everything's changed and he does Minnie the Moocher, I'm like, oh, this is that guy who sings that song, like that whole sort of thing.
Yeah, I think James Brown was, as Cleophas James is fantastic as the Reverend. Ray Charles, obviously, was a big one. Aretha Franklin. Those are the big four. James Brown, Cab Calloway, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin that I feel like I would have gotten pretty early. But the others, and it was as I started exploring more kind of blues music that I start, catching up with folks like John Lee Hooker, and some of the rest of the band that came from SNL. And then you start falling in love with movies and you get these nods to like Frank Oz. What is Frank Oz doing in this movie? Which is just fantastic.
Frank Oz, Steven Spielberg. Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg, right, gets drawn away as the Cook County assessor. Twiggy, it was another one that I don't feel like I discovered until later, but she's definitely a face that I immediately recognized again this time. Like I can't believe she's still in here. It's a real who's who of these people. Like every single guy, even Mr. T shows up in this movie. As a guy on the street, but it's still fun to peek out for all these faces. Paul Rubens, don't forget Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens,
as
right?
The waiter.
Yeah.
And as it happens, I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the film, with my son, and we watched these back to back. And so it was super fun to see Paul Rubens show up there.
So little, he's so little. Oh, and the little boy who's stealing the guitar in Ray Charles's shop.
Yeah.
Argyle from Die Hard.
Oh my goodness!
I was like, why does that kid
Devereaux
look vaguely
White.
familiar? Yes.
Oh wow!
That
awesome.
Completely surprised me when I was looking him up. I'm like, oh, that's why he's so familiar. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
so good. James Avery shows up. Joe Walsh. Got to say, Joe Walsh was in there as an inmate early on. Yeah.
Well, we haven't said Carrie Fisher, and that's probably who I most connected with initially, just because
you're right.
She had been so much a part of my life as Princess Leia, and so that was just it was really kind of fun to see her in this part that as a kid, I was like, I never quite understood. I'm like, what is going on with her character? It's such a and this speaks also to the writing of the times that the way that her character is treated in the film, it's very misogynist. It's very, sadly, just of its time. It still is funny, like watching her, go through from insane weapon to insane weapon to insane weapon, trying to take out these two brothers. Yeah. It's not until we have that conversation between her and Jake late in the film, and you really, God, they just treat women poorly. And the 80s. Ugh.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think if anything, I mentioned that we were doing the show last week on I think on Saturday Matinee, and Chrissy had responded with kind of a scrunchy face nod, and I was like, wait a minute, why is this movie one that isn't aging well? I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't remember, and that is just such a gift of ignorance of perspectives, right? Like watching this again. The Carrie Fisher line is for me the troublesome line, not because of the comedy in the setup, but because of the way he treats her at the end. I know they're going for the thoughtless joke, right? And I know what I can feel what they were going for, but it just doesn't play. It just doesn't play. And I think that the punchline does not match the setup of the joke of Carrie Fisher as the scorned ex. I just felt like it was rushed. It was kind of shoehorned in and didn't make a lot of sense. And every time we went back to Carrie Fisher, I thought, why is she here? Like, in hindsight, why do we even have her written into the movie? It's such a small part overall of their kind of Cannonball Run-esque journey that I just didn't. I find I didn't need it.
Yeah. I feel like, just like all these other faces, I thought it was probably fun for them to get Carrie Fisher in here because she was so big. This is the same year that Empire Strikes Back comes out, and so it makes sense to kind of have, this will be great having her show up in this film this way. It does end up feeling a little unfortunate the way that they put it together, and it speaks to largely, again, just how women were treated, how Carrie Fisher was treated in even by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, it's just like, ugh, do we have to be going through this again? And so it's frustrating. And then that paired with thinking about John Landis again, I'm like, oh God, these things that I don't want to be thinking about with this film, it's just so annoying.
I know. Can I ask a sideline question? Because this does bring up the fact that Carrie Fisher works at at Curl Up and Die, which I think is a fantastic name for a beauty stylist, a beauty salon. Yeah. But that's not something you get in the theatrical cut, I don't believe. What did you watch? Which version did you watch? And do you have a stance on theatrical versus the extended?
Yeah, I watched the extended this time. It was the first time that I had watched it. I've had the movie for forever, but it was not one, because it wasn't a director's cut. I often kind of like, well, they're just throwing stuff in there just to, make it a selling point to get people to get it again or whatever. And so I sometimes just don't worry too much about jumping into the extended editions of things. I was curious about it since I had never seen it, and I figured, well, I'll just watch it this time and see what's different. And it's pretty easy to tell what's different because the film, it wasn't treated the same, and so it's a pretty apparent difference when they jump from what we had always had to kind of those deleted or extended scenes, and so. That largely, there are a couple scenes that actually take place. One is you find out that she does work at the Curl Up and Die beauty salon, which is a fantastic name. If anything was added back in, it would have been great to just have that, just to get that shop name. Right. It's just a perfect name for a beauty salon. The other one that really is kind of an actual scene is you actually see Elwood at work. He goes into a place where he works, and it looks like he's dealing with epoxy, like the canned epoxy stuff that you see him use later when he sprays the pedals in the cars and stuff like that. And so there's he works at a place there, but he quits his job because he's going to, as he tells his boss, he's going to become a priest. And in the process, he's taking some of these cans with him. It's an odd little scene. It doesn't really do anything for the film because all it really does is set up how he got those cans that he uses later. It's not that necessary. Other than that, it's just really extended kind of versions of a lot of the musical numbers. And so it really wasn't that revelatory to watch this. It's nice having the longer musical numbers, but I think that the regular cut is probably what I would watch from this point moving forward.
So I had both, and I started I started watching, I think, I don't know if I started watching just sort of indiscriminately because I have it on my sort of home media server. So I just press play and I wouldn't even have been able to tell you the differences anymore. I think I've watched the extended version just by default more. And so I actually had to go back and look for the differences just to realize which version I'd been watching. I don't even remember. I can't imagine cutting some of those things for a theatrical cut anymore. So, weird experience with this movie.
Yeah. But I mean, it is, from what I could tell, it's not like, director approved or anything that John Landis had wanted to be the original release. I mean, I know he did have a longer cut and had to cut it down in order to kind of fit the demands of the studio and all that sort of stuff. But it's not like he had been fighting, and it's not like, people were clamoring for this cut to get released or anything. And I don't know how much of a hand he had in adding all the footage back in, but it feels fine. It doesn't feel off by having this stuff in. It's not like you're watching deleted scenes that you're like, eh. So. Well,
and it's a music movie, and one thing we do get in this movie is longer cuts of the music.
Yeah, right.
And that's a good thing for a music movie.
It is, although like watching it, I'm like, I was like, is it longer? Because like, I guess I just never thought of the songs as having been cut. And so when you watch the longer version, I guess it was a surprise that I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that like there was stuff missing here. It just didn't, I never felt like the songs had been hacked,
Yeah.
Well. So, but I mean, yeah, there's a lot of great music in the movie, and I think the movie works well. I mean, in either way you want to watch it, I think the movie's going to work.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the music. Do you have any particular favorites? I mean, we've already mentioned a lot of the performers that are singing, not to mention the Blues Brothers that perform a number of times throughout the film. What am I, I always get a laugh out of them performing the theme to Rawhide. One of the funniest bits in the movie when they end up in the Western bar. We have two kinds of music here. We have country and we have Western.
And Western. Yeah, right. I am a big fan of, I like the whole thing, right? So, so it's hard to pick one, but Shake a Tail Feather with Ray Charles, just because we get the Ray Charles performance, I think is so fun. Theme from Rawhide for sure. Minnie the Moocher is way at the top, but I'm a longtime fan of Cab Calloway. The one that always stands out for me, and I will sing every time I watch this movie, I'll sing this song in my head for days, is Sweet Home Chicago. I just love it. It's an anthem of this movie for me, and it is the first. You say Sweet Home Chicago, the first thing I think is Blues Brothers.
Interesting. I mean, definitely I think that, but also Aretha Franklin's Think. I mean, that song I just feel is just an iconic element from this film. Like that and Shake a Tail Feather for me are the two main standouts of the movie for me. Like those songs come on and I just stop everything that I'm doing and just kind of just sit there and sing along, because I think those two songs are just so fantastic.
I just think Sweet Home Chicago, it's also an anthem for Chicago. And I just, like, we don't have a song, Portland. Like, there's no Portland song. What's a Portland song? Nothing. There's no Portland song. So I just, I find that song sticks out to me because I'm a little bit jealous that we have no anthem.
I mean, geez, Chicago already had a song from Robin and the Seven Hoods.
Yeah, okay.
What was that song?
Right. Chicago has too many songs, is what we're saying.
That Toddle in Town, right?
Yeah.
So spread the love. Spread the love. Maybe you need to get some stuff.
What's Phoenix's song? Like, does Phoenix have an anthem? No, nothing.
Who was the was it Sufjan Stevens who was doing those state albums for a while? I think his initial intention was to do one for every state before he realized how long it was going to take him. And
he said, "What the hell am I going to do with Oregon?" I guess the project is over.
Exactly. Although I will say it was some of the songs that he came up with some of the states. I'm like, well, he came up with more than I thought he would for some of these places. It was such a funny. I mean, what did he do? He did Illinois. Maybe it was only Illinois. Again, frickin' Illinois. Like, why is Illinois getting all this love?
Yeah.
Oh, he did Michigan also. Illinois and Michigan. So he managed and then he gave up on that thing. So I'm not exactly sure why Chicago gets so much love. But yeah, I mean, there needs to, he has a song on that album, Go Chicago, Go, yeah. So there's another one. Yeah,
I don't care for it.
Yeah,
I don't care for it.
But anyway, yeah, great songs. And yes, you're right. I mean, the Blues Brothers, there's a reason that I think that they ended up lasting, and it's because these guys really did perform these great songs. And you hear like Sweet Home Chicago, or I mean Jailhouse Rock at the end, even them singing like She Caught the Katy at the beginning. We don't see them performing it, but they're singing it. It's like I mean they do great performances, and they just have a sound that works incredibly well. And so that's, I think, why that stuff stands out and makes the characters last as long as they have.
So, okay, so that's the music. I think we have reached the part of the show where we have to broach the topic of Nazis.
I was going to say car chases, but sure.
What did you think of the American Socialist White People's Party? Remember when Nazis in film were a joke?
Yeah, it's very funny going back and revisiting this and hitting those things where it's like, oh, yeah, this is something that we have to go through again. And, I have such a fondness for Henry Gibson as an actor. And then I hit this part. I'm like, oh, God, I got to have Henry Gibson as the little Nazi party leader. And, I mean, obviously it's designed to be something where the characters in the film, the filmmakers clearly have issues with this group. That, I mean, it started in 1959, dissolved in 1983, so it hadn't lasted much longer after this movie. And it was probably because of stuff like this where people were just like, we're tired of this, just end it already. And but still, just seeing them in the film, I'm just like, oh, this was a thing. How ridiculous is that? It
was a thing.
Yeah.
I didn't care for it. It was a joke. It was a joke. I mean, not like I didn't care for it. I don't care. I'm going to say it right here, Andy. I don't care for Nazis. I'm going to draw a line in the sand at Nazis.
Yeah,
I think I did laugh. I mean, I laughed at the whole bit, especially when they careen over the bridge and push all the Nazis into the river. That's funny and a bit satisfying. And so it's okay. It's fine. It's funny.
It's fine. You do have to end up ending it. And this feels also of its time and kind of from the mind of John Landis, when you have to end it on a gay joke as a way to further, put them down. It's like, there are a lot of issues to be had with this. But, it makes for funny in the film. It works in context of what the story's doing. And, in context of just one more party chasing down those Blues Brothers, it's nice to kind of just throw that into the mix at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I mean, at the end, you've got, and again, speaking to car chases, it starts off with the car chase that goes through the mall. And if that car chase wasn't destructive enough, I mean, you're destroying the mall. You have, you're going under the, I don't know, Chicago, it's a strange city where I feel like it's a city on top of a city. You've got these whole layers underneath where it just feels like there's all these roads. I don't fully understand it. I know they exploited it quite a bit in The Dark Knight. It feels like such a strange place to have all these roads everywhere. And, but you have all the police cruisers. At that point in the film, I love the bit when John Candy and his, the cruiser that he's in crashes into the truck and he's like, we're in a truck, as he calls it in. But then there's the big car chase at the end. And I mean, this is after they get the money and they're trying to get to the county assessor's office where Steven Spielberg works. And it's this massive, massive car chase. And this is, I already talked about what John Landis wanted to spend on this film. We haven't even got to the point where we're talking about what he ended up spending in the making of this film, because he just wanted car chase like bigger and bigger and bigger. And I mean, I think this still, how many vehicles did they end up destroying? It was over 100.
I think you moved on way too fast from the mall trashing, and I want to talk about that some more.
Okay.
Because that mall in particular is the Dixie Square Mall, And it is one of the great examples of dead malls. It was only in operation for 12 years, and in 1978, it had been largely just open, and they closed the mall. Like, all the retail space was closed up, and so they found this mall and said, "We're going to do this thing in this mall," and they said, "Okay," and then the owners of the mall just left it, and so it sat there for decades, just in a destroyed state. And for photographers, it became a central destination in the spirit of urban exploration, taking incredible photos of abandoned facilities around the planet. And so when you search for the Dixie Square Mall photos, you can find some incredibly dramatic photos of just urban sort of Anthropocene decay that are legend. Like, this place is a real cornerstone of that now. And I think I think it's either gone now. In 2013, there were plans to finally demolish it and get rid of it, according to the Chicago Tribune. But I don't know if it's still there or not.
It's always interesting when locations are used and abused and then just left to sit. Right. Isn't that kind of the case with the Popeye Island, where they just where
the whole
entire
set
island
is still there?
Yeah. It's crazy that that those sorts of things end up happening.
Final demolition of the Dixie Square Mall on February 12th. It was gone in May of 2012. Dixie Square Mall is gone.
Okay. So this was the movie that held the world record for the most cars destroyed in one film. It actually did get surpassed by a single car in the sequel. I think they very intentionally wanted to break the record, and so they did it with just one more car when they made the sequel. Yeah, interesting. So there were 104 cars destroyed in this film. One more in the Blues Brothers 2000. 103 in Blues Brothers, 104 in Blues Brothers 2000. The record was broken in 2009 by G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, which destroyed 112 cars.
Oh my God.
So
that the Blues Brothers, G.I. Joe would be the one that takes the.
You'd think it would be like a Fast and Furious movie or something.
Exactly. But none of those cars are real.
They never leave the green screen stage.
Exactly.
One car that's also in this film that pretty much gets destroyed. It's the Bluesmobile, which became quite an iconic car. What would you say is? Would you say it's as iconic as the Ghostbusters car? Probably not.
No, it was just so the thing about the Bluesmobiles, it was pretty generic at the time, right? Just painting it black. It became iconic when they strapped the giant speaker to it.
Exactly. And like, if you see people nowadays like recreating it for, Comic-Cons and stuff like that. It's
always got the speaker on it.
Exactly. It always has the speaker on top. And if you see it sitting, there's House of Blues, the restaurant that kind of spun off of this whole thing. They sometimes will have one of those sitting out in front, stuff like that. So, it's definitely a thing that people have kind of created just for, the sake of that. But yeah, it probably would be Ghostbusters higher than this film. Although I think this is a pretty easy to spot one when you do see it.
Yep. Agreed. Cool car.
Yeah. As far as I have to talk about this. We're going to talk about the numbers and all that sort of stuff, but I have to talk a little bit about the release plans for this film, because it's shocking, not shocking. 1980. We have to remember, this is the era of 1980, which is, part of our lifetime, but it also, you forget about how long ago it was and the mentality at the time. When this film was put together for release, Belushi's popularity had diminished a little bit. He, between his rise to fame with Saturday Night Live and Animal House, he also did 1941 for Steven Spielberg, which wasn't received that well. So people were a little more hesitant about this film, and the studio head at Universal, they invited, this is Lou Wasserman, head of Universal, invited John Landis to talk to Ted Mann, head of Mann Theaters, which was a chain at the time and very big in the western half of the United States. Mann told John Landis that he is not going to book the theater in any predominantly white neighborhoods because this is what the quote is on Wikipedia. Not only did Mann not want black patrons going there to see the film, but he also surmised that white viewers were unlikely to see a film featuring older black musical stars. And so they did not give it a big release at the time it came out because of that, which is, again, just like you look at it now and the history of these people in this film, it's really shocking that like this was the mentality that they were going into with putting the plans together for the release of the film.
Oh, God. So. Yeah, it's rough.
Yep. Okay, well, I guess that's it. So we will be right back, but first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Duff Music, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at d-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at True Story FM. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. All right, Andy, sequels and remakes. We've already mentioned Blues Brothers 2000, but we're not going to talk about it, just that it exists.
Oh, come on. We have to talk about it. It was terrible. Did you see it in theaters?
No.
I did.
No.
I was working at the movie theater, so of course I was watching everything that came out. It was a terrible, terrible movie.
Why was it so terrible? Because I can tell you, not only did I not see it in theaters, I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, interesting. Going back and trying to craft a story long after Belushi had died, coming up with something that tried to fit in where, he's using, I think Elwood is he finally gets released from prison after everything that happened in the first film, waiting for his brother. The warden tells him your brother's dead. And so he ends up with John Goodman, with Joe Morton and a kid. And they kind of create this new Blues Brothers group. And I don't know, it was just a very similar sort of plot. I can't exactly remember the plot. It's just they were trying to rehash doing the same sort of thing that they had already done with the first film. And it really just felt like a rehash. Like, let's get a whole bunch of other musicians in. I mean, they have all these great guests again. Aretha Franklin shows up again. James Brown shows up again. You got Wilson Pickett. Blues Travelers in there. I mean, it's interesting to see kind of the lineup that they got for this follow-up, but it felt like we're just doing the same thing again. And it just didn't feel like there was anything original at all. And it was, I don't know. I really didn't care for it. I mean, I haven't seen it since it came out in 98, but I just remember going, God, why did they bother?
So interesting. Wilson Pickett, Erykah Badu, Blues Traveler. Come on, John Popper. Naughty little minx. Paul Schaefer actually had a strong hand in the original, in the music arrangement of the original.
Right.
B.B. King, Dr. John. Oh, I mean, great, fantastic musical cast.
Absolutely. I mean,
way to discount the musical cast.
And if there's a reason to kind of check it out again, it's because they do have this great lineup of the musicians again. The Louisiana Gator Boys are back. And so I think that there's a lot of good music in it. The story was just really, really sad. It just does not hold a candle to this one. Yeah.
Wow. Made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for biggest pileup.
Yeah. Lots of cars.
Yeah. So many cars. Well
other stuff the Blues Brothers did, there was a book published right around the time of this one that was just a little bit, it was called Blues Brothers Private. And John Belushi's wife had written it. And it just kind of it was about the Blues Brothers, the universe in which they take place. And then there was also Blues Brothers video game that came out 11 years after the movie, 1991. It's basically you're trying to get away from the police and get to the concert. So it's funny that it was big enough to, that late end up doing a video game.
I've never even heard of the video game. And have you watched any of the playthrough, or did you play it? Are you a big fan?
No, I've never heard of it. I didn't know it existed either until I was researching this.
Well, thank you, YouTube. Let's get right in there. See if we can get a speed run through the Blues Brothers on SNES. I do. I have it takes 41 minutes to play through the whole thing. And the animation is, as you would expect. It is a Mario-like side scroller. I think Elwood has no shirt on in this part. I think
probably
it's
so you
possible.
can identify the difference.
He is so muscular. It's like, I think there's like a power-up that makes him a mess. It rips his shirt off. This is extraordinary. This is essentially Mario Brothers, but with the Blues Brothers. It's not good.
But I mean, to the point of Blues Brothers, other things. I mean, there's plenty of music. I already mentioned, they had 5 live albums, 2 studio albums. Both of those, the studio albums were done, other musicians. It was not when John Belushi was around.
Right.
I think he only was around for the 2 live albums, Briefcase Full of Blues and Made in America.
And the soundtrack to the film, obviously.
Well, and the soundtrack
was actually technically a studio album.
Sure. But it's that's kind of the realm of sequels and remakes. I don't know. Dan Aykroyd really kind of has seemed to fallen out of just even doing film projects. So I can't imagine that at this point he's been contemplating any return to the Blues Brothers again.
Right.
I think it probably is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, did it win any awards? Is there excitement we should have for award season?
It had 2 wins and 1 other nomination. Not a big award sort of film. One of the wins doesn't really count. It was the 2020 National Film Preservation Board. IMDb always lists this as an award win. It was added to the National Film Registry is what happened in 2020. So technically that means it had only 1 win, and that was at the Motion Picture Sound Editors. It won the Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing Sound Effects, and I can certainly see that. The other nomination that it had was at the 1984 Turkish Film Critics Association Awards, where it was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. It ended up in 4th place. It was an interesting run of films because, 1984, it's a few years after it came out, but this is Turkey. The run of films that it had, it lost to Being There, which was 1st place, The Marriage of Maria Braun, 2nd place, and Gloria for 3rd place. The other films after this in 4th place, there was Brubaker, Under Fire, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The King of Comedy, Hardcore, and Still of the Night. A very kind of odd amalgam of films that the Turkish film critics nominated that year.
Wow. That's, Well, all right. Worth it. How about at the box office? You already outed that it performed very, very well as a, in our conversation about the SNL adaptations.
SNL films,
and that I assume is good because it cost, $3 to make?
We went over. As I said, there was that bidding war to get the film. Initially, Universal's, they started at $12 million. Landis wanted $20 million with the unfinished script, with all of the car crashes and everything he wanted to do. The budget ended up being $27.5 million. So more than twice what Universal initially wanted to spend. That's $85.5 million in today's dollars. This actually landed the film as one of the most expensive comedies ever produced, which I think is pretty interesting.
Wow. So many cars.
So many cars, exactly. The movie ended up releasing June 20th, 1980, opposite Brubaker and Can't Stop the Music. Nothing released, though, could knock down the juggernaut in the number 1 spot for its 6th straight week, The Empire Strikes Back. That's going to retain its number 1 spot for 8 more weeks before finally getting knocked down by all things Smokey and the Bandit 2. That's right. This movie went on to earn $57.2 million domestically and $58 million internationally, something which Landis has been keen to point out as showing that this movie to be the first American film to gross more money overseas than it did in the States. I have no idea if that's true. The 58 seems a little artificial just to beat that 57.2, but who am I to say? Regardless, assuming it's all copacetic, that means the movie earned $358.3 million total in today's dollars. That puts everyone in a good place, landing with an adjusted profit per finished minute of just over $2 million.
$2 million. That's pretty good.
I'd take that
on the
per
list.
minute.
On our list of AppFilms. That's
Yes.
high.
Indeed.
I think I'm on level, I don't know. But let me tell you, there is the only thing that I can find in this video game that is,
Love that.
yeah, I'm still
Were you
watching.
even paying attention? You're like, no, this
No,
video
I don't
game.
give it. I don't care what you're doing right now. Is there? I mean, he's in a dungeon right now. He does, in fact, eat what I think is a snail that is laced with something, and that's when he rips his shirt off and becomes Mega Elwood. And the only other thing that it seems appropriate to the film is that there are bees. He has to knock down bees. He also has to knock down like uber snails that are out to get him. It's very strange. Dungeon, very spiky. I don't understand this game at all. That's all I have to say about that. What are you going to do for Letterboxd?
I've just always loved this film. It's a 5-star and a heart film for me. It's, even with all of the, the issues that I have with it and the things that strike me funny, I think it's just one of those films that came at a point in my life where it's just so easy to just sit back and watch. And so, yeah, it's 5 stars.
You know what, Andy? Do you want to call my shot? Do you want to Babe Ruth it?
No, you're 5 stars in heart. I don't even have to.
Yeah, you don't even have to. I'm 5 stars. I do love this movie. I love this movie. I have a lot of fun with this movie, and I think it's possible to say that this video game, I'm on stage 9 now, it actually makes the movie better. This is canon now. This is canon.
By the way, just to circle all the way back to the beginning, the book about everything that happened on Twilight Zone is called Outrageous Conduct, Art, Ego, and the Twilight Zone Case by Stephen Farber and Mark Green.
Nice callback. Andy.
Yeah, there you go. All right, everybody. Well, we want to know what you thought about the Blues Brothers. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in a Discord community. We're going to be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Jake is now riding a dragon in this video game. Jesus. Okay.
They really expanded that universe.
I went, he's flying. It is a flying dragon. Well, you go first.
Okay.
What do you
I had landed on a 4-star by Dr. Frank Imstein. I'm not exactly sure. 4 stars. Had this to say, it would be an honor to be hunted and killed by Carrie Fisher. Just bringing it back around.
What a weird thing. What a weird flex. Okay. Well, I decided to go down just to see what's at the bottom.
Yeah. What's at the bottom of the pool?
And there's a lot of seriously, this is the worst, horrible movie. But I like this one because this is not the only one that has this sentiment. And I feel like it might be talking to us. Busy Steph gives it a 0.5-star review and says, a damn shame of a movie with a cast led by those white buffoons. All of that and not an original song in sight. None of this made any sense and most of it was annoying, but at least I have something to talk to my dad about at Christmas. There are so many of these reviews at the bottom that are like, reminds me of my dad, thumbs down.
Oh, I have a feeling that we're kind of the dad pool in this, which is probably true, but it is what it is.
Here's one of truth. A movie about how black people can put on dozens of show-stopping numbers and 2 white men will still be the leads. Right? It's the worst. I get it. It's the worst. Perspective is everything. I get it, but yeah. That's it. That's all I have to say. Okay. Thanks, Letterboxd. You're the best.